What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Daddy Jeep Garage YouTube channel. This week we're going to be diagnosing why my fuel gauge hasn't worked in a very long time. I've got a brand new Autometer fuel gauge up there. I've got the pretty typical RCI 2161 fuel cell, I think this is. Just in case you haven't seen yet, I didn't quite mount this like everybody else does. I actually recessed it down through my floor and built a skid plate, even with the bottom of the frame rail, to get a little more storage room back here. But has nothing to do with my fuel gauge problem, but I just wanted to point that out while we're in here. So we're going to be diagnosing why my sending unit is sending a constant just above E reading on my gauge. It's not reading all the way full like some people have. It's not reading all the way empty. It's reading somewhere in the middle no matter what I do. So we're going to dive into that. Piece sitting here just doesn't look like it should be there. I bet that should be up underneath this. Doesn't appear to be leaking, so I'm not really going to worry about it. But yeah, there should be a float hooked onto this arm here. Go ahead and put some power into the system and see if I can make my gauge move, which I cannot. So regardless of the float being missing, I'm still not able to make my gauge move by moving this arm. So something is still not right. So here's what we got on this system. We have two wires. This green wire that runs to the gauge, and this black wire that's a ground. The ground I just have grounded to the tub over here. So one would think the ground would go to the ground and the gauge would go to this pin, which is how I had it wired. And that's currently showing on my gauge just a little above empty. So if I move this arm, one would think that would change, but it does not. No matter what I do, it's showing the same reading on my gauge. So here's what we have here. We have my sending unit. I'm going to set my float arm as if it's full. My green wire comes from my gauge. That goes on the post, which again, I had it wrong because I've been trying to figure out how to make this thing work. So my green wire on my post, my black wire is my ground. I'm reading just over empty. I have another ground post over here. If I try that, it reads the exact same thing. So what I originally had was this mounted backwards with my ground to my center post and my hot to this, what appears to be the ground post on the sending unit. I get the exact same result. So by switching my wires, changing my float level, nothing changes. So something is not right. Do I have the wrong gauge for my sending unit? I believe the sending unit in this tank is a standard GM style 90 ohm, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I bought all this stuff, but I'm pretty confident I matched up my Autometer gauge with the sending unit. But maybe I screwed that up, so I guess I got to go back and I got to do a little research and figure out where I've screwed this up, because my wiring is connected to the gauge. I am able to change the reading, or at least make my needle move, so something is happening there. So I gotta figure out what my problem is, but I would love to have a gas gauge. So I did a little research, learned a few things. None of it really made sense to what I'm seeing. I was gonna come down here and I was gonna measure the ohms on the travel of this thing, and then it hit me that maybe this thing that's not where it belongs is an isolator to keep that from grounding against the ground, and maybe that's causing my whole problem. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this apart and get this rubber isolator, plastic isolator, whatever it is, back where it belongs. See if that fixes my problem. First rubber piece went on before this did. I can see some discolorations in the coating. as to how that lined up, and it indexes on some pins. There it is right there. So then the second rubber grommet sandwiches that, then the plastic, then the brass. Okay, that's better. I can stretch that over there. I just want this to be snug because I don't want to pull that back through the rubber, because I really think that was my problem. So, if that was my problem, this should work now. So now we can tighten up this ground post on this ring terminal. That should work. Then we'll put some power to it and see if this thing reads right now. Of course, this Evil Energy fuel pump is the noisiest fuel pump I've ever had. The gauge is reading about full, which that's all the way up. Moved it back a little bit. It's reading about 3/4. Move it all the way down, and it reads empty. It reads about 1/4. Well, there you have it. Problem solved. I somehow got rid of that insulator that isolated this post from the ground. That's all it was. We just need to reassemble it and we'll have a fuel gauge again. I'm going to bring you in real close here to explain exactly how this got screwed up, because I didn't see anything about this in my research, so this is very important. So this, let me set it down so I can get a pointer. Use these hemostats. So this piece right here is a square rubber isolator. So what happened is this nut and this piece of metal pulled through that isolator and were touching this aluminum cap. That's what caused it to read funny. So the only thing I can think of that caused that is I over tightened this nut when I was trying to tighten up my ring terminal, and it tightened that nut and it ended up pulling that bolt head through the rubber. So that's what locked it at a certain ohm reading, and that's why I would only read my gauge at that setting. So by getting that isolator repaired, I ended up flipping it over. It's not exactly how it should be. There was a lip around it, but it's working this way, so I'm going to leave it alone. But by isolating that the way it's properly supposed to be, everything works like it should again. Get it clipped in there. So I went ahead and taped up this hole in the tank because, well, I didn't want any junk in my tank. So you pull that back off. Carefully get the float back down in there. So I know all my pickups and my fuel lines are down here, so we need to make sure the float goes away from all that so it doesn't interfere with something else in the tank, because there's nothing that really dictates how this thing sits in here other than just making sure you do it right. So there you have it, guys. With a little bit of diagnostic work, maybe a little bit of luck, and just some using the old noggin to come up with some ideas, we solved a problem that's been plaguing me for quite some time. So I'm real happy with that. Glad you guys stuck in there this long. Please hit that like button, subscribe, leave some comments. We'll see you next time.